Right now, somewhere in your home, there's a shelf. Maybe it's in the kitchen. Maybe it's under the bathroom sink, or in that corner of the garage where you keep stuff you're not sure what to do with. And on that shelf, there are things you've been quietly planning to throw out. Things with dates stamped on them. Dates that feel like a quiet, authoritative verdict. A tiny printed clock, counting down to the moment when that product officially becomes trash. Well, here's the thing nobody on the label is going to tell you. A massive number of those dates were invented, not by chemists, not by safety scientists, but by marketing departments sitting in conference rooms figuring out how to get you back in the store. The science of real shelf life has almost nothing to do with the numbers printed on your containers. And once you understand the actual chemistry, the real physics of what makes something degrade, you're going to look at your shelves very differently. We're going to go product by product, the things most of us already have, and we're going to talk about what chemistry and history actually say about how long they last. This isn't fear-mongering. This is the opposite. This is the moment you stop letting printed numbers do your thinking for you. Subscribe to this channel right now so you don't miss a single installment of what we're calling the Shelf Life Truth Project. And drop your city in the comments. We're tracking how far this marketing deception has spread region by region. Now let's get into it. Product 1. Pure dried whole bay leaves, the flat leathery ones you toss into soups and stews and promptly forget about for the rest of the year. The kind that's been sitting in a jar at the back of your spice rack since the last time you made a big pot of something on a cold Sunday. The jar probably says something polite like, Best Buy, followed by a date that came and went while you were busy living your life. And here's where it gets interesting, because bay leaves are essentially the natural world's own preservation technology. The essential oils locked inside those dried leaves, primarily cineol, linalool, and eugenol, are so chemically hostile to microbial life that bacteria and mold can't get a foothold at all. The leaf itself, when fully dried, contains virtually no free water, which means the biological machinery required for decomposition has nothing to run on. Historians have found dried aromatic herbs in sealed clay vessels from ancient Mediterranean civilizations that were still fragrant and identifiable after 2,000 years. 2,000 years. And your grocery store jar is telling you to replace these after 12 months. Stow. Seriously? The only thing that meaningfully degrades in a dried bay leaf over time is the intensity of aroma, and that's about the moisture level of your storage environment, not some internal chemical clock ticking toward expiration. Keep them sealed, keep them away from heat and direct sunlight, and those leaves will season your grandmother's soup recipe just as well in 15 years as they do today. The system wants you cycling through spice jars every year because that's a revenue stream built entirely on chemistry you were never taught in school. Congratulations! You just reclaimed a perfectly immortal ingredient from your own trash can. Product 2. Pure cream of tartar, that small container of white crystalline powder you bought for one recipe 3 years ago and haven't touched since. Potassium bitartrate. It's a byproduct of winemaking, a naturally occurring acid salt that precipitates out of grape juice during fermentation and gets scraped off the inside of barrels. And the key word here is salt. Not salt like table salt, but a stable, ionic, crystalline structure that is chemically inert under normal household conditions. There's no fat in cream of tartar. There's no protein. There's no moisture. Well, what exactly is supposed to go bad? Bacteria don't eat it, mold doesn't colonize it, oxygen doesn't oxidize it. The crystals just sit there in their orderly little lattice being perfectly themselves, indefinitely. Ancient wine-producing regions have found deposits of natural potassium bitartrate in archaeological contexts dating back thousands of years, and the compound is structurally identical to what you'd buy in the store today. Corporations print Best Buy dates on cream of tartar because the law and marketing convention require it, not because the product has any biological clock. If your jar is sealed and stored somewhere that isn't soaking in humidity, that powder will stabilize your egg whites and leaven your baked goods with the same precision in 20 years that it does right now. The whole spice industry depends on you not knowing this. One small jar, properly stored, is essentially forever. Congratulations! You just found out your baking cabinet contains a geological artifact masquerading as a disposable household product. Product 3. A box of plain, unflavored, unsweetened gelatin, the kind that comes in those little paper envelopes or in bulk powder form. Pure collagen protein, dehydrated down to a fine, odorless, tan-colored dust. The food industry stamps a use-by date of about 2 years on this product, which, once you understand what gelatin actually is chemically, reads like a very polished joke told with a straight face. Gelatin is essentially the stripped-down protein skeleton left after all biological activity has been removed through processing. It's been denatured, dried, and rendered about as biochemically inert as something derived from a living organism can get. Without water, protein chains can't unfold, enzymes can't function, and microbial life has no substrate to colonize. The Egyptians used animal-derived glues and gelatin compounds in their woodworking and art, and archaeologists have found these materials in functional condition inside sealed tombs after 3,000 years. 3,000 years of darkness, of temperature swings, of history happening over their heads, and the collagen held. Keep your gelatin in a sealed container away from moisture, and it will be perfectly ready to set your desserts and stocks decades from now. The system sells it in tiny single-use packets, specifically so you go through them quickly and come back for more. A bulk bag kept sealed is an investment in a product that fundamentally doesn't know how to expire. Congratulations! The thing you almost threw out because of a printed date is actually one of the most chemically stable food products in your kitchen. Product 4. Distilled white vinegar in a sealed glass bottle. 5% acetic acid in water, which is itself a powerful antimicrobial agent, a natural preservative, and one of the most chemically self-sustaining liquids you will ever store in your pantry. Here's the beautiful irony. Vinegar is the product of fermentation, yes, but once that fermentation is complete and the liquid is distilled down to its final acid concentration, it becomes actively hostile to any further biological activity. Bacteria that would spoil other liquids get dissolved by the very substance they'd need to survive in. The acetic acid doesn't degrade at room temperature. It doesn't react with air in the bottle. It doesn't oxidize or polymerize or do anything inconvenient to its own chemical structure. Well, what do we know? Ancient Romans used vinegar, they called it posca, as a preserving agent, a cleaning solution, a wound disinfectant, and a beverage. Roman legions carried it in sealed containers across half a continent, sometimes for years. Your bottle with the Best Buy label of 18 months is part of a long, proud tradition of being told to replace something that has no intention of changing. The flavor might mellow very slightly in an unsealed container over many years as trace volatiles escape, but the cleaning power, the preservation power, the antimicrobial power, those are locked into the acid concentration and they don't go anywhere. Congratulations, your cleaning cabinet just became eternal. Product 5. Whole dried lentils, brown, green, red, or French, sitting in a sealed bag or jar. Compact, hard, dry little protein and fiber capsules that the food industry insists you use within 1 to 2 years of purchase. And the thing is, that's not entirely wrong as far as cooking quality goes. But cooking quality and food safety are two very different things, and the marketing machine has been quietly blurring that line for decades. Nutritionally and microbiologically, properly stored dried lentils are essentially indefinite. The moisture content of a well-dried lentil is low enough that bacterial growth is physically impossible. There's no free water for enzymatic activity. The seed coat protects the interior from oxidation. Archaeologists working in the ancient Near East and Egypt have recovered dried legumes from sealed storage vessels that are 3,000 and 4,000 years old. And while the texture after cooking may differ from fresh stock, the protein content and caloric density remain. The only meaningful change over very long storage is a gradual hardening of the seed coat, which makes lentils take longer to cook, and a slight reduction in some heat-sensitive vitamins. Neither of those things makes them dangerous. Neither of those things makes them trash. The food industry absolutely does not want you building multi-year pantry reserves from a product that costs $1 a pound. That would devastate their quarterly projections. Congratulations! Your dollar bag of lentils is an emergency food reserve that the system would prefer you treat as disposable. Product 6. Pure dried rosemary, whole sprigs or just the needle-like leaves in a jar. A woody resinous Mediterranean herb that has been used as a food preservative, a medicinal plant, and a culinary staple for literally thousands of years before anyone invented the concept of a best buy date. The essential oils in rosemary, rosmarinic acid, carnosol, camphor, are so potent as antioxidants and antimicrobials that the food industry actually extracts them and sells them as commercial preservatives for other foods. You read that right. The thing that supposedly expires in 12 months is the source ingredient for compounds used to keep other products shelf-stable for years. Internally, in a sealed, dried form, rosemary essentially preserves itself. The volatile oils give it a self-protecting chemical environment. The low moisture content means no biological activity. The woody, fibrous structure of the dried needles resists oxidation far longer than any ground or processed form. In ancient Egyptian, Greek, and Roman cultures, dried rosemary was used in embalming preparations and long-term storage because people instinctively understood that it didn't break down. Your spice jar isn't going to tell you any of that. Instead, it will show you a date that moves units. Keep your rosemary sealed, store it away from heat, and it will flavor your roast chicken just as beautifully in a decade as it does tonight. Congratulations! Your spice rack contains a self-preserving pharmaceutical plant that the industry is quietly selling you as trash. Product 7. Food-grade diatomaceous earth, the fine, white, chalky powder that you might have in the pantry for pest control or in the garden shed as a soil amendment. Fossilized skeletal remains of microscopic aquatic algae called diatoms, compressed over millions of years into soft sedimentary rock and then ground into powder. And let's be very clear about what this is. It's a rock, ground up, microscopic rock. The food industry and the garden supply industry print best buy dates on bags of this material, which is honestly one of the most spectacular examples of regulatory theater in the history of consumer goods. What exactly is the mechanism by which fossilized algae from the Miocene epoch, having survived somewhere between 5 and 15 million years of geological time, is supposed to deteriorate in the 18 months it sits on your garage shelf? Silica dioxide does not oxidize. It doesn't react with atmospheric gases under normal conditions. Bacteria don't colonize it. It kills them mechanically. Sunlight doesn't photograde it. It is, by every chemical definition, inert. If your bag is sealed to keep moisture out and prevent clumping, the diatomaceous earth inside will perform identically in pest control, filtration, or soil application, whether you're using it today or in 30 years. The system needs you to believe rocks expire, because if you don't believe that, you might only buy one bag, and one bag might last your lifetime. Congratulations, you own a product that is older than any human civilization and will outlast every piece of plastic in your house. Product 8. Whole dried chickpeas, the large cream-colored legumes that are the backbone of hummus, curries, and stews in cultures from the Mediterranean to South Asia. Unlike their canned equivalent, which is essentially a processed, waterlogged, preservative-laden product, dried chickpeas are essentially a seed in suspended animation. The hard outer coat of the dried chickpea is an evolutionary masterwork in moisture management. It keeps internal humidity levels low enough that enzymatic activity is halted. It shields the interior proteins and starches from oxidative damage. It creates a physical barrier that mold and bacteria cannot easily breach without water. Roman-era storage amphoras recovered from shipwrecks and buried grain stores have contained dried legumes in chemically stable condition after more than 2,000 years. Food historians who have studied ancient agricultural storage systems note that civilizations specifically relied on the indefinite shelf life of dried legumes as their core famine insurance. And here we are today with a use-by date of 2 years on a bag of chickpeas. That date is not about food science. It's about inventory cycles and purchase frequency algorithms in a grocery chain's logistics software. Store your chickpeas sealed in a cool, dark place away from moisture, and they will be a perfectly valid, nutritionally complete emergency food source in 15 years. They may take slightly longer to cook, and some water-soluble vitamins will reduce over time. But the protein, the fiber, the minerals, those are staying right where they are. Congratulations! Your pantry just became a survival asset. Product 9. Sealed glass containers of pure raw honey. The real thing, not the diluted high-fructose corn syrup blends many commercial brands try to pass off as the genuine article, but actual natural honey with moisture content below 18%. Honey is one of the most chemically extraordinary food preservation systems ever produced by nature. The enzymatic activity of bees introduces hydrogen peroxide into honey during production. The osmotic pressure of the extremely concentrated sugar solution draws water out of any bacterial cell that attempts to colonize it, killing it immediately. The low pH creates an acidic environment hostile to microbial growth. The result is a substance so inhospitable to biological decomposition that archaeologists have found perfectly edible, unspoiled honey in sealed ceramic vessels from ancient Egyptian tombs, vessels more than 3,000 years old. 3,000 years, perfectly edible. So when a grocery store label tells you raw honey has a shelf life of 2 years, that's not chemistry speaking. That's a company that wants you to buy another jar. The only thing that happens to sealed, pure honey over time is that it crystallizes, which is a physical change, not a chemical one, and which reverses completely when gently warmed. If your honey has separated or crystallized, it isn't spoiled. It's just being honey. The adulterated commercial blends are a different story. Extra water and corn syrup give bacteria the foothold they need. But pure, sealed, raw honey? Congratulations! You have a product that doesn't just resist time. It was designed by evolution to defeat it entirely. Product 10. Whole dried black peppercorns. The small, wrinkled, dense little spheres that most American households have in a grinder on the kitchen table or in a jar on the spice rack. Not ground, not pre-cracked, but whole. The difference matters enormously. Ground pepper is exposed to oxygen, which begins oxidizing the piperine, the compound responsible for pepper's heat, and the aromatic volatile oils almost immediately. That's why pre-ground pepper in a can loses potency within months. But a whole peppercorn is a sealed system. The outer skin of the dried berry acts as a near-perfect barrier against oxidative attack. The volatile oils inside, piperine, caryophyllene, linalool, are sealed behind that husk, protected from the very conditions that would degrade them. Historical records from the spice trade document whole peppercorns being transported on voyages of more than a year with no meaningful loss of quality. Roman tax records from the 5th century reference the value of whole black pepper as equivalent to precious metals, and that valuation assumed a product with extremely long useful life. Archaeologists have found whole peppercorns in Roman-era sites that still produced chemical analysis consistent with fresh pepper. The industry wants you buying the small jar, running out, and buying another. A large container of whole peppercorns, kept sealed and away from heat, will be flavoring your food long after the cardboard spice aisle display that it came from has been recycled several times over. Congratulations! Your pepper grinder is loaded with a product that is essentially timeless. Product 11. Pressed pure beeswax blocks or bars, the kind you might find at a craft store, a beekeeper's market, or a natural goods shop. Solid, clean, slightly honeyed-smelling blocks of one of the most chemically stable organic materials on Earth. Beeswax is a complex ester of fatty acids and alcohols, but unlike animal fats or vegetable oils, it's not composed of the kinds of triglycerides that readily undergo oxidation and rancidity. It's hydrophobic, meaning it repels water completely, giving bacteria nowhere to establish. It contains natural antimicrobial compounds from the hive environment, and its molecular structure is compact and stable in a way that resists the enzymatic breakdown pathways that destroy most organic materials. Archaeologists have recovered pure beeswax from Egyptian tombs in recognizable, usable condition after more than 3,000 years. Wax found at ancient shipwreck sites in the Mediterranean has been chemically analyzed and found to be structurally identical to freshly produced beeswax. Same melting point, same ester profile, same properties. Craft stores and candle suppliers print best-by dates on beeswax products. Nope, That's not science. That's the liability lawyer who told them they legally need a date on everything, combined with the marketing team that saw an opportunity to create artificial scarcity in a product that nature designed to be immortal. Keep your beeswax wrapped in paper or sealed in a container away from dust and extreme heat, and it will be making candles, conditioning leather, waterproofing fabric, and lubricating wood joints for your grandchildren. Congratulations! You have acquired a material that outlived the pharaohs. Product 12. Dried whole cinnamon sticks. Not the pre-ground powder which loses its volatile compounds to atmospheric oxidation relatively quickly, but the whole quills of dried cinnamomum bark, tightly rolled and sealed. The chemical magic of cinnamon is concentrated in cinnamaldehyde, the primary volatile compound, and a range of supporting polyphenols, all of which are trapped inside the cellular structure of the bark and protected by the tight rolling of the quill itself. In whole form, cinnamon is essentially its own sealed delivery system. Spice trade records from medieval Europe document cinnamon being transported from Sri Lanka and Indonesia in whole stick form specifically because everyone in the trade understood that the whole form maintained quality over the months-long sea voyages in ways that ground products simply couldn't. Arab and Portuguese spice merchants who controlled the trade routes in the 15th and 16th centuries maintained cinnamon inventories for years, not weeks. Today, a jar of cinnamon sticks on your kitchen shelf will be labeled with a best buy of about 2 years. That date is for the ground version, and even then it's conservative relative to the actual chemistry. Whole cinnamon sticks, stored in a sealed jar away from heat, will retain their essential oils and aromatic compounds for a decade or more. They'll be slightly less intense than fresh, but slightly less intense is nowhere near expired or useless. It's just chemistry doing what it does, very slowly. Congratulations! Your spice rack just got a 10-year extension. Product 13. Pure salt. Not iodized, not with anti-caking agents, not with added flavoring, but plain mineral sodium chloride. Sea salt, kosher salt, Himalayan pink salt. These are geological deposits, crystalline mineral structures that formed millions of years ago and were already in exactly their current chemical form long before any human institution ever invented the idea of a best buy date. And yet, walk into any grocery store and you will find table salt, with an expiration date printed on the container. This is, without any exaggeration, one of the most cosmically absurd examples of regulatory theater in modern consumer culture. Sodium chloride does not spoil. It does not oxidize. It does not degrade under biological attack because bacteria cannot colonize a mineral crystal. It does not undergo chemical transformation at normal temperatures and pressures. The only thing that can go wrong with pure salt is that it absorbs atmospheric moisture and clumps, a physical inconvenience, not a safety issue, and one that reverses with gentle drying. Salt was used for millennia as the primary preservation technology of human civilization, specifically because of its absolute chemical permanence. Roman soldiers were allegedly paid in salt. Salary derives from the Latin word for it, because it was understood to be a stable, enduring material of essentially infinite shelf life. The salt in your kitchen is not different. A sealed container of pure sodium chloride will be perfectly functional as a food preservative, flavor agent, cleaning compound, and electrolyte source long after every piece of plastic in your home is turned to dust. Congratulations! You own one of the oldest and most honest consumer products in human history. Product 14. Dried whole cumin seeds. Small, ridged, boat-shaped seeds that are the foundation of an enormous range of cuisines from Mexican to Indian to Middle Eastern. Sealed and whole, they are chemically engineered by nature to survive far beyond what any grocery label will admit. Like other intact whole spices, cumin seeds carry their volatile oils, primarily cuminaldehyde, locked inside the seed's own cellular architecture. That architecture is a barrier against oxidation, against moisture, against the atmospheric degradation that immediately begins destroying flavor and potency the moment you grind the seed open. Dried whole cumin seeds found in Egyptian archaeological sites have been dated to more than 3,000 years of age. They were preserved because, as ancient Egyptians fully understood through practical experience, Dried whole spice seeds essentially don't degrade under the right storage conditions. The trade routes that moved cumin from Persia and Egypt to Europe in the medieval period operated on timescales of 1 to 2 years per shipment, and quality was maintained precisely because merchants knew to ship and store in whole seed form. Modern spice companies would prefer you buying small jars of pre-ground powder that oxidizes in 90 days and forces monthly repurchase. A large jar of whole cumin seeds, sealed and stored in a cool, dark location, will be flavoring your cooking for a decade or more. Congratulations, you just graduated from the grocery store's quarterly repurchase program. Product 15. Pure food-grade activated charcoal powder. Not the pills or capsules with binders and fillers, but pure powdered activated carbon. The same substance found in water filtration systems, emergency toxin binding treatments, and various purification applications. Let's understand what this actually is. It's carbon, elemental carbon. The same atom that makes up diamonds, graphite, and every organic molecule in your body, but here arranged in a highly porous structure with almost unimaginably large internal surface area. And there is essentially no chemical environment on Earth at household temperatures and pressures that will cause elemental carbon to degrade. Carbon does not oxidize at room temperature. It does not react with atmospheric moisture. Bacteria cannot consume it because there's nothing biologically useful in its structure. The porous architecture is physically stable and self-maintaining. Companies print best-by dates of 3 to 5 years on activated charcoal products. And that date is, charitably, an extremely conservative estimate driven entirely by regulatory compliance requirements, not by any observation of actual product degradation. The only functional concern with activated charcoal over time is that the porous structure may gradually adsorb ambient gases and odors from the storage environment, meaning a container left open in a damp, smelly environment might lose some of its adsorptive capacity. Sealed in a dry environment, it retains its capacity essentially indefinitely. Congratulations! You own a substance that is more chemically stable than most of the currencies of the world. Product 16. Sealed jars of pure blackstrap molasses, the thick, dark, mineral-rich byproduct of sugarcane processing. The last extraction in the refining process, dense with iron, calcium, magnesium, potassium, and B vitamins, and with a sugar concentration so high that it functions as its own preservation system. The extreme osmotic pressure of a high-concentration sugar solution creates conditions in which bacterial survival is essentially impossible. This is the same principle that makes pure honey self-preserving, but molasses operates through a slightly different biochemical mechanism due to its additional mineral and organic acid content. Properly sealed molasses has been found in intact condition in archaeological contexts from ancient sugar-producing civilizations in India, the Caribbean, and Southeast Asia. The shelf life labeled on commercial molasses is typically about 2 years. The actual chemistry argues for decades, assuming the container remains properly sealed and stored away from extreme temperature cycles that could cause condensation on the inside surface of the lid. The real enemy of long-stored molasses isn't time. It's the introduction of ambient moisture through repeated opening and closing of an improperly resealed container. That's a storage behavior problem, not an inherent product instability. The industry wants you treating this mineral powerhouse as a condiment that gets replaced seasonally. The chemistry says it's a multi-year nutrient reserve. Congratulations! The jar in your pantry just became something worth stocking intentionally. Product 17. Commercial-grade pure powdered sulfur, available at garden supply stores as a fungicide and soil acidifier, and at some health stores in food-grade form. Elemental sulfur. One of the oldest pest and disease control agents in agricultural history, used since ancient Roman times to protect vineyards and orchards from fungal infection. A pure non-metal element with a chemical structure so simple and so inert under normal atmospheric conditions that the concept of it expiring is essentially a category error, like asking when a rock will go bad. Sulfur does not oxidize at room temperature in any meaningful way. It does not hydrolyze in atmospheric humidity. Bacteria cannot consume it because elemental sulfur provides no nutritional substrate for cellular metabolism. Fungi that sulfur is supposed to kill are actually destroyed by it, not the other way around. The garden supply industry prints 1 to 2 year best buy dates on powdered sulfur, which is purely illegal and inventory management formality. Roman agricultural manuals from 2,000 years ago describe sulfur storage and use practices that assumed indefinite useful life, and the Romans were not wrong. A sealed container of pure powdered sulfur, stored in a cool, dry location away from heat sources, will perform identically as a soil amendment and fungal control agent in 20 years as it does today. Congratulations! You have a garden product that was protecting crops before the Roman Empire fell, and it hasn't changed since. Product 18. Sealed tins or glass jars of pure green tea leaves. Not tea bags, not flavored blends, not matcha, but loose-leaf dried green tea in its whole or broken leaf form. The tea industry aggressively markets freshness with best buy dates of 12 to 18 months, and the specialty tea world has created an entire culture of seasonal freshness and first flush scarcity. And look, there is truth to the argument that fresh green tea tastes better. The subtle, delicate, volatile aromatics do fade over time. But here's what doesn't fade: the polyphenolic antioxidant content, primarily the catechin family, including EGCG, which is the primary reason anyone is drinking green tea for health purposes in the first place. These compounds are structurally stable over many years when stored away from oxygen, light, and moisture. Japanese matcha, which is essentially stone-ground whole-dried green tea leaf, has been stored in sealed containers in traditional Japanese tea ceremony practice for periods extending well beyond commercial best buy windows and retains significant antioxidant activity. The difference between perfectly fresh and 2 years old in terms of health impact is probably not worth the cost of replacing the tin. What you're paying for when you buy fresh tea isn't a meaningfully better health product. It's a slightly more aromatic morning ritual, manufactured by an industry that has figured out how to monetize a preference for novelty. Keep your sealed tea in a cool, dark location, and it will be delivering polyphenols to your bloodstream for years past the date on the tin. Congratulations! Your tea cabinet is more of a long-term health investment than you knew. Product 19. Bulk dry oats. Rolled oats, steel-cut oats, or whole oat groats, stored in a sealed container. Not instant oatmeal with added flavoring, milk powder, and sugar, but the plain grain itself. Oats have a somewhat more complex shelf life story than some other grains because they do contain fat, specifically in the bran layer, and those fats can eventually undergo oxidative rancidity. That's the industry's opening. But here's what the industry doesn't emphasize. That rancidity process is very slow in properly stored whole or rolled oats, and it results in off flavor long before it results in any genuine food safety concern. More importantly, oat groats, the whole, minimally processed form, store significantly longer than rolled oats because the outer hull provides additional protection against oxidative access. When stored sealed, away from oxygen exposure, in a cool location, whole oat groats have shelf-stable nutrition for many years. Various long-term food storage testing programs and university extension studies have documented whole grains maintaining nutritional integrity well beyond their labeled dates when proper conditions are maintained. The 2-year best buy on a canister of oats is conservative to the point of being commercially convenient. The industry would love you to cycle through a new canister every year. Your well-stored grain doesn't agree. Congratulations! Your breakfast staple just became a legitimate pantry asset. Product 20. Pure organic sulfur crystals, sold as MSM, methyl sulfonyl methane, a naturally occurring sulfur compound found in plants and animals, sold in bulk crystal or powder form as a dietary supplement for joint health and inflammation support. The supplement industry prints expiration dates of 2 years on MSM, which, given that MSM is an extremely stable organic compound with a simple molecular structure and an inherently low reactivity profile, deserves a raised eyebrow. MSM crystals are odorless, tasteless, water-soluble, and remarkably inert in dry storage. The compound is not prone to hydrolysis at room temperature. It doesn't oxidize readily. It doesn't react with atmospheric gases in ways that would alter its chemical identity. Studies examining MSM stability have found no meaningful degradation under standard dry storage conditions over periods significantly exceeding manufacturer-labeled dates. The supplement industry's dating is largely driven by a regulatory environment that requires dates, plus a business model that needs recurring purchases. If your sealed container of MSM crystals has been sitting in a dry cabinet for 3 or 4 years, the compound inside is almost certainly chemically identical to what you'd find in a fresh package. Congratulations! One of the most conservative sectors of the supplement industry managed to put an expiration date on crystallized sulfur. Product 21. Whole dried cloves, the nail-shaped, dark reddish-brown flower buds of the Syzygium aromaticum tree. One of the most chemically potent whole spices in the world, and one of the most spectacularly misrepresented in terms of shelf life. Cloves contain eugenol at concentrations of 70 to 90% of their essential oil content. Eugenol is so powerfully antimicrobial that it's used as a primary active ingredient in dental treatments, mouthwashes, and topical antiseptics. The whole bud, in dried form, is essentially a sealed chemical weapon against any biological agent that might try to break it down. Mold doesn't grow on whole dried cloves. Bacteria don't colonize them. Insects avoid them because the eugenol concentration is physically intolerable to most invertebrate nervous systems. Indonesian and Zanzibar clove merchants historically operated on trade cycles measured in years, and whole cloves maintained full potency across those shipment timelines. The English East India Company maintained clove inventories for periods far exceeding any modern Best Buy timeline. A jar of whole dried cloves on your spice shelf, sealed and stored at room temperature, will retain potent antimicrobial properties, culinary punch, and aromatic intensity for a decade or more. The date on the jar is a recommendation to buy more. The chemistry is a guarantee of permanence. Congratulations! Your spice cabinet contains a natural antiseptic that was protecting trade ship cargo before the United States existed as a country. Product 22. Pure anhydrous lanolin, refined wool grease, the natural waxy substance secreted by sheep's sebaceous glands and extracted during the wool washing process. Available at pharmacies, health stores, and craft suppliers in various grades from cosmetic to industrial. Lanolin is not a fat in the conventional sense. It's a complex wax ester, more similar chemically to beeswax than to vegetable or animal oils, and this distinction is critical to its shelf life. Ordinary fats go rancid because their triglyceride structures are vulnerable to oxidative attack at the glycerol ester bonds. Lanolin's wax ester bonds are far less reactive. The compound also contains natural antioxidants and antimicrobial factors derived from its biological origin. Pharmaceutical-grade anhydrous lanolin, the kind used in medical ointment bases and topical skin treatments, has been documented maintaining chemical stability well beyond standard Best Buy windows when stored sealed away from extreme heat. The cosmetic industry labels lanolin products with 2 to 3 year dates because formulations with added water, fragrance, or other co-ingredients may be unstable, not because pure anhydrous lanolin itself has a biological clock. A tin of pure lanolin in a sealed container in a cool location will be moisturizing and protecting cracked skin, conditioning leather, preserving metal from corrosion, and lubricating mechanical parts for many years. Congratulations! You have a product that kept sheep's wool waterproof through ice ages and will do the same for your skin indefinitely. Product 23. Pure food-grade calcium carbonate powder, the very same compound that makes up chalk, limestone, marble, and a substantial portion of seashells, eggshells, and coral. Available as a dietary calcium supplement, as a food-grade antacid, as a gardening additive for pH adjustment, and in craft applications. Calcium carbonate is a mineral salt, an ionic compound of calcium and carbonate ions arranged in one of several crystalline structures. It does not react with atmospheric oxygen. It does not react with atmospheric nitrogen. At normal humidity levels, it absorbs trivial amounts of moisture without any structural or chemical change. Bacteria can't metabolize it. Mold can't grow on it. Enzymes have nothing to act on. It's a rock. Specifically, it's the chemical substance that makes up the White Cliffs of Dover, which have been sitting there fully intact for approximately 66 million years. Supplement companies and garden supply stores print 2 years or 3 years on packages of calcium carbonate. This is purely regulatory compliance. The actual substance inside those packages has a geological timeline that makes all human industry look like a weekend hobby. A sealed bag of calcium carbonate powder, kept dry, will perform identically in dietary supplementation, pH adjustment, or any other application in 50 years as it does today. Congratulations! You own a product that is, in every meaningful chemical sense, older than the Cretaceous period and in no danger of changing. Product 24. Whole dried juniper berries, the small, blue-purple resinous fruits of various juniperous species, used as a spice in game dishes, brines, and sauces, and as the primary flavoring agent in gin. In traditional European and Native American cultures, juniper berries were used not just for flavor, but as preservatives and antimicrobial agents, both in food preparation and in medicinal applications. The chemistry behind their durability is the same principle as whole cloves, an extremely high concentration of volatile antimicrobial oils, primarily alpha-pinene, saponine, and myrcene, locked inside the berry's resinous coating creates an environment hostile to the very microorganisms that would normally cause decomposition. The berry's natural resin also acts as a physical sealant, slowing the evaporation of volatile compounds over time. Native American groups used juniper in food preservation and storage for generations, relying on exactly this self-protective chemistry. Whole dried juniper berries stored in a sealed container will maintain their essential oil content and aromatic profile for years, far beyond any date on the jar. The flavor does slowly mellow as the most volatile compounds escape, but the underlying antimicrobial and flavoring chemistry is far more persistent than the 1-year recommendation on most packages would suggest. Congratulations! You have a spice that was flavoring venison stews long before European settlers landed on this continent. Product 25. Sealed containers of pure ascorbic acid powder. Vitamin C in its basic chemical form. Not a multivitamin blend, not a chewable tablet with binders and flavorings, but pure L-ascorbic acid crystals or fine powder. The supplement industry dates ascorbic acid products aggressively, typically 1 to 2 years, and this is partially justified by the fact that ascorbic acid is a relatively reactive molecule that will oxidize over time when exposed to oxygen, heat, light, and moisture. That's real. However, and this is important, those degradation conditions are highly dependent on storage environment. Ascorbic acid stored in a sealed, opaque container with minimal headspace, kept away from heat and light, degrades significantly more slowly than the industry's worst-case expiration dates imply. Pharmaceutical research into ascorbic acid stability has consistently found that sealed, dry-stored crystals maintain potency well beyond labeled dates when storage conditions are good. The industry's conservative dating is designed for the average consumer who leaves things in a warm, light-exposed environment and opens the container frequently. If you're storing it correctly, cool, dark, sealed, your vitamin C is working far longer than the date says. Congratulations, your immune system insurance policy just got a significant extension. Product 26. Pure rice wine vinegar. The mild, slightly sweet, pale gold vinegar used across East Asian cuisines as a condiment, marinade base, sushi seasoning, and dressing component. Like all vinegars, rice wine vinegar is an acetic acid solution, and the chemistry of acetic acid stability at room temperature is straightforward. It doesn't degrade under normal conditions. The acid itself is a small, simple organic molecule that doesn't oxidize in a conventional storage scenario, doesn't react with atmospheric gases, and actively prevents bacterial colonization of the liquid. The flavor of rice wine vinegar does evolve subtly over many years, especially in open containers, as trace aromatic compounds slowly volatilize or undergo minor esterification reactions. But those changes are flavor nuances, not food safety issues. Japanese traditional vinegar producers have historically worked with aged rice vinegars stored in sealed vessels for years, not months, specifically because the flavor profile deepens over time. The best buy date on your bottle of rice wine vinegar is a marketing convention. A sealed bottle in a cool pantry will be performing its pickling, marinating, and flavor functions for decades. Congratulations! Your pantry just expanded its useful timeline by a factor of 10. Product 27. Pure dried spearmint or peppermint leaves. Not mint extract, not mint flavoring, but the actual dried herb in leaf form, sealed in a jar or tea tin. Mint leaves dry to a stable, low-moisture state in which the essential oils, primarily menthol and menthone in peppermint, carvone in spearmint, are retained within the cellular structure of the leaf. The high concentration of these oils in the dried herb creates a self-preserving chemical environment, similar to other volatile oil-rich herbs like rosemary and thyme. Historical herb traders who supplied pharmacopoeias and apothecaries in Europe and America understood that properly dried, sealed mint could be stored for years without meaningful loss of therapeutic or culinary value. Early American pharmacopoeias listed dried peppermint with multi-year useful life assumptions. Today, a tea tin of dried mint leaves with a date of 12 months serves primarily to ensure turnover on the shelf, not to reflect the actual chemical reality of the product inside. Sealed and stored away from heat and direct light, your dried mint will be making tea, flavoring food, and freshening breath for years beyond the date. The aroma does fade very gradually, yes, but gradual and slow is not the same thing as expired and dangerous. Congratulations, your herbal tea drawer just became a long-term wellness asset. Product 28. Food-grade citric acid powder. The white crystalline powder used as a preservative, flavor enhancer, and cleaning agent in everything from lemonade mixes to canning recipes to dishwasher descalers. Citric acid is a naturally occurring organic acid, one of the most widely distributed compounds in the plant and animal kingdoms. In its purified anhydrous crystalline form, it is essentially inert under normal storage conditions. The crystals don't oxidize appreciably. Bacteria can't colonize a dry crystalline acid environment. The compound doesn't undergo any spontaneous chemical transformation at room temperature that would alter its identity or reduce its functionality. The 1-year or 2-year dates on bags of citric acid powder are, at this point, almost a cliché of unnecessary food dating. Industrial food processing facilities treat citric acid as a long shelf-life ingredient and buy it in multi-year supplies. Home canners and soap makers who buy the same compound at the grocery store are told to replace it annually. Same compound, very different story depending on whether you're generating quarterly profit targets or not. If your bag is sealed and stored in a dry location, your citric acid will be preserving your canned tomatoes, descaling your coffee maker, and flavoring your drinks for many years past the printed date. Congratulations! Your pantry just gained a durable, multi-purpose chemical workhorse with a genuine shelf life the industry would rather you didn't know about. Product 29. Whole dried star anise. The beautiful 8-pointed brown pods from the Illicium verum tree, primarily used in Chinese 5-spice powder, pho, and various braised meat dishes. Like other whole spices, star anise earns its shelf-life durability through a combination of low moisture content and an extremely high concentration of antimicrobial essential oils, in this case, primarily transanethol, which constitutes anywhere from 70 to 90% of the pod's volatile oil content. Transanethol is so chemically stable and so biologically hostile to most microbial life that star anise pods were used historically as insect repellents and natural food preservatives in addition to flavoring agents. The Chinese spice trade, which is among the oldest organized commodity systems in human history, maintained star anise in trade inventories for months and years with full quality expectations. The distinctive shape of the whole pod means its surface area to volume ratio is relatively low, slowing the evaporation of those essential oils compared to any ground or crushed form. A sealed jar of whole star anise stored at room temperature will maintain its essential oil content and antimicrobial potency for years, not months. The date on the jar is for the distributor's inventory system. The chemistry is on your side. Congratulations! Your kitchen contains a spice whose trade route built civilizations, and it's nowhere near done. Product 30. Sealed containers of pure cocoa butter. The pale yellow, mildly chocolate-scented fat extracted from cacao beans, used in chocolate production, skincare, and cosmetics. Cocoa butter is unusually resistant to oxidative rancidity for a vegetable fat. Its fatty acid composition is dominated by stearic, oleic, and palmitic acids, with a very low proportion of polyunsaturated fatty acids, and it's the polyunsaturated fraction that is most vulnerable to oxidation in other oils. Cocoa butter's natural stability is so well documented that it's used as the fat phase in topical pharmaceutical formulations, specifically because its long-term stability can be relied upon. This isn't a trade secret. It's in the pharmaceutical formulation literature. The beauty industry, however, prints best-by dates of 2 years on cocoa butter products, which creates a convenient reason to repurchase. Pure, unrefined cocoa butter in a sealed container, stored away from heat and direct light, will maintain its full cosmetic and culinary functionality for many years. It may yellow slightly, oxidation of trace polyphenols, not the fat itself, but yellowing doesn't compromise efficacy. Chocolate makers have historically worked with cocoa butter stored for well beyond any consumer product date. Congratulations! The bar in your bathroom cabinet is a pharmaceutical-grade stable fat that the beauty industry would prefer you thought of as perishable. Product 31. Pure salt petre, potassium nitrate, available at garden centers as a fertilizer component and historically used as a food curing agent, a component of cold packs, and in various preservation applications. Potassium nitrate is an inorganic ionic compound, a crystalline salt of potassium and nitrate ions. It doesn't biodegrade. It doesn't react with atmospheric oxygen. It doesn't undergo any spontaneous chemical transformation under normal household conditions. Ancient civilizations in China, India, and the Middle East used potassium nitrate in food preservation, agriculture, and other applications for thousands of years, maintaining stores across seasonal and multi-year timescales. The compound's role in curing meat, the preservation of bacon, ham, and similar products, relies on its long-term chemical stability, and traditional curers understood this implicitly. Storing naturally occurring saltpeter was a practical, indefinite life proposition. Modern garden fertilizer bags print dates because they contain mixed formulations with added organic compounds that may degrade, or because regulatory compliance requires a date on everything sold as a consumer product. Pure potassium nitrate crystals in a sealed container are, from a chemistry standpoint, essentially permanent under normal household conditions. Note that potassium nitrate should always be stored responsibly and used only according to product guidelines, as all concentrated chemicals require proper handling. Congratulations! You have an agricultural and preservation tool with a chemical pedigree measured in centuries. Product 32. Whole dried fenugreek seeds. The small, amber-colored, slightly bitter seeds used extensively in Indian, Middle Eastern, and North African cuisines, as well as in Ayurvedic and traditional medicine systems. Fenugreek seeds are among the more robust whole spices in terms of long-term storage, combining a hard outer seed coat that resists moisture infiltration with a complex internal chemistry of saponins, alkaloids, and volatile oils that collectively resist microbial attack. Traditional Indian households maintained fenugreek seed stores as multi-year pantry staples, replenishing from seasonal crops and relying on the grain's inherent stability to bridge harvest seasons. Archaeological evidence from excavations in the Near East and South Asia has documented dried fenugreek seeds in sealed ceramic storage vessels, maintaining identifiable structure and chemical markers after thousands of years. The seed's slightly bitter, maple-like flavor does gradually fade in improperly stored conditions, as volatile compounds slowly escape from cracked or compromised seed coats, but under sealed storage, this process is extremely slow. The food industry and spice retailers print dates of 1 year or 18 months on whole fenugreek seeds. This is commercially driven, not chemistry driven. A sealed jar in your pantry, stored in normal room conditions, will be producing the same slightly bitter, maple-like depth of flavor in your curries and breads for many years beyond that date. Congratulations! Your spice collection just got a significant upgrade in longevity. Product 33. Pure food-grade glycerin, also written as glycerol, the clear, sweet, viscous liquid that appears as an ingredient in everything from baking moisturizers to soap making to pharmaceutical tablet coatings to e-cigarette liquids. Glycerin is a simple polyol compound. 3 carbon atoms, 3 hydroxyl groups, stable enough that it's considered pharmaceutically inactive and is used specifically as an inert carrier and humectant in formulations where stability is required. It's miscible with water, yes, but in its pure form, without added water or organic compounds that bacteria could metabolize, it's actually hostile to microbial growth because its hygroscopic properties draw water out of bacterial cells at the cell membrane level. Pharmaceutical manufacturers have maintained glycerin in sealed storage for years as a standard formulation ingredient, relying on its stability as a baseline assumption. Yet grocery and craft stores label pure glycerin with 1 to 2 year expiration dates. This is a formulation date, relevant when glycerin is blended with other ingredients, that has been extended to pure glycerin containers because differentiation is commercially inconvenient. Pure sealed glycerin in a cool location will maintain its viscosity, sweetness, hygroscopic function, and chemical identity indefinitely. Congratulations! One of the most chemically boring, stable liquids in your cabinet has been quietly misrepresented as a perishable. Product 34. Whole dried coriander seeds. Not ground coriander powder, but the whole round seeds that smell faintly of citrus and wood when cracked. Used in Indian, Mexican, Middle Eastern, and European cuisines, and in traditional medicine systems across 3 continents. Whole dried coriander seeds maintain their essential oils, dominated by linalool, which is the same compound that gives lavender its distinctive scent, within the intact seed hull. That hull is the key. It's a physical and chemical barrier that dramatically slows the oxidation and evaporation of the seed's aromatic compounds compared to any ground form. Medieval European spice merchants understood the primacy of whole form storage. Their trade ledgers and quality specifications always emphasized that ground product commanded premium prices at purchase but degraded rapidly in transit, while whole seed held value across the months-long journey from east to west. Archaeological digs at ancient Roman spice trading posts have found whole coriander seeds in sealed amphorae in recognizable condition. The date on your supermarket jar of whole coriander seeds is a marketing convention, not a chemical necessity. Sealed and stored away from heat, those seeds will be flavoring your food for years. The flavor evolution over time is real. The profile shifts as the most volatile top notes slowly escape, but it remains useful and characterful for far longer than any label will admit. Congratulations! Your kitchen contains a spice with a shelf life measured in market seasons, not months. Product 35. Pure baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, stored in a sealed, airtight container. Not the open box you keep in the fridge to absorb odors, which is doing exactly what it's designed to do and losing reactivity through that process, but a properly sealed container of pure NaHCO3. Sodium bicarbonate is an ionic compound. In its dry sealed form, it's chemically stable and doesn't spontaneously decompose at room temperature. The leavening reaction that makes it useful in baking requires moisture and an acid component, neither of which is present in the dry powder inside a sealed container. The famous test your baking soda recommendation, dropping it in vinegar to see if it fizzes, is a useful quality check, but the reason old baking soda sometimes fails that test is not that the compound itself has degraded, it's that the container was exposed to moist air over time, causing partial surface reaction that can form a mild crust while the interior remains fully reactive. A truly sealed, dry container of baking soda will retain full leavening reactivity for years. The best buy date of 1 year on baking soda boxes is calibrated for the cardboard boxes with the pop-open tops that allow atmospheric moisture exchange every time you open the pantry. In a sealed glass or metal container, you're looking at a multi-year supply of a completely reliable leavening agent. Congratulations! One of your most basic kitchen chemicals has a longer shelf life than its packaging admits. Product 36. Pure dried turmeric root pieces or whole dried turmeric rhizome, not the pre-ground powder which oxidizes and loses curcumin potency relatively quickly, but the dried whole root pieces available at South Asian grocery stores and natural food markets. Turmeric's primary active compound, curcumin, is a polyphenolic pigment that is light-sensitive and temperature-sensitive, but relatively stable under cool, dark, dry storage conditions. In whole dried form, the curcumin is embedded within the cellular matrix of the root, protected from direct light exposure and atmospheric oxidation by the surrounding fiber and starch. Traditional Ayurvedic medicine stores, which maintain large inventories of dried roots and herbs as part of normal practice, have historically operated on storage timelines far exceeding anything printed on a modern consumer package. Indian households that purchase turmeric root directly from markets, as they did for thousands of years before mass-packaged spices existed, naturally stored the whole dried root for months and years. The best buy on a bag of pre-ground turmeric is genuinely relevant because the grinding exposes the curcumin to surface oxidation and volatile oil loss. But whole dried root stored sealed in a cool location is a significantly longer life product. The anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties you're after in turmeric are locked inside that root. Congratulations! The whole-form root version of this ancient medicine is far more shelf-stable than the industry's packaging suggests. Product 37. Dried whole red lentil seeds, specifically the small red variety, often called masoor dal in South Asian tradition, that splits easily and cooks quickly. Wait, didn't we cover lentils already? The earlier product discussed brown and green lentils, which are the whole, unsplit varieties. Red lentils are typically split and hulled, and that's an important distinction for shelf life. Hulled, split lentils have more exposed surface area and slightly higher fat accessibility than whole lentils, making them marginally more susceptible to oxidative change over very long timescales. But marginally more susceptible still means stable for many years under proper conditions. The protein matrix, the starch, the mineral content, the caloric density, none of these change in a way that creates any food safety concern over standard storage periods. Studies on stored legumes consistently find that sealed, cool, dry storage extends safe use well beyond labeled dates, with the primary observable change being a gradual increase in cooking time. The industry's 1 to 2 year dates for split red lentils are based on quality standards for commercial distributors who face liability concerns and need to guarantee a consistent cooking experience. Your home pantry operates under different constraints. A large sealed bag of red lentils stored properly in your kitchen will remain nutritionally complete, culinarily useful, and perfectly safe long past any commercially printed date. Congratulations! Your budget protein source just became a long-range pantry asset. Product 38. Pure dried lavender buds, the small, intensely fragrant purple-gray flower buds of Lavandula angustifolia, used in culinary applications, herbal medicine, aromatherapy, and craft. The essential oil of lavender, dominated by linalool and linaloyl acetate, is present in the dried bud at high enough concentrations to function as a meaningful antimicrobial agent. This is not folk belief. Linalool and linaloyl acetate have well-documented antibacterial and antifungal activity that's been studied in pharmaceutical research contexts. The dried bud, in whole form, retains these compounds within its compact cellular structure far longer than any extracted or diluted lavender oil product. Traditional European herbal pharmacies and apothecaries maintained dried lavender in their dispensaries as a long-term stock item, routinely working with product that was a year or two old without any concern. Lavender sachets placed in linen closets were understood to remain effective for years. The food industry and aromatherapy market print one-year dates on dried lavender, primarily to create purchase cycles and justify the premium pricing on fresh product. A sealed container of dried lavender buds in a cool, dark location will retain both aromatic intensity and antimicrobial function for years past the printed date. The fragrance fades gradually, that's real, but the compounds causing that fragrance don't disappear, they just become less volatile at the surface. Congratulations! Your lavender drawer is a longer-term asset than any candle company wants you to know. Product 39. Whole dried cardamom pods, the small papery green or white pods containing the black aromatic seeds that are the foundation of chai tea, Indian desserts, and Scandinavian baking. Cardamom is among the most expensive spices in the world by weight, and the whole pod form is its most stable presentation. The green or white outer pod is not just packaging, it's a biological barrier protecting the seeds and their essential oils from atmospheric exposure. The seeds inside contain 1,8-cineol, terpineol acetate, and other volatile compounds at high concentrations, and the pod walls slow the diffusion of those compounds into the surrounding environment significantly. The spice trade routes from Guatemala, India, and Sri Lanka that supply global cardamom demand involve storage periods of months before the product reaches any retail shelf. Industry insiders understand that the whole pod form maintains quality across these extended supply chain timelines, precisely because of the pod's protective function. Yet retail packaging shows dates of 12 to 18 months. These dates are for the ground version, generalized to the whole form for labeling consistency. Sealed whole cardamom pods in a cool, dark location will be making your morning chai and perfuming your rice dishes for years beyond what the jar suggests. The moment you grind them, that's when the real race against time begins. Congratulations, your most expensive spice just earned a significantly better return on investment. Product 40. Food-grade bentonite clay powder, the aluminum phyllosilicate mineral used in wine clarification, digestive detox preparations, cat litter, and various industrial applications. Like other clays, bentonite is a geological substance, a mineral that formed over millions of years in volcanic ash sediment layers and has been commercially mined and processed into powder for numerous applications. In its dry powdered form, bentonite is chemically inert under normal household conditions. The clay's characteristic behavior, its ability to swell in water and absorb positive ions and organic compounds, is a physical and chemical property of the mineral structure itself, not a biological activity that degrades over time. No microorganism is eating your clay. No atmospheric gas is oxidizing its adsorptive sites. No chemical reaction is spontaneously consuming its useful properties while it sits on your shelf. The health supplement and beauty industry prints dates of 1 to 2 years on bentonite clay products, which reflects regulatory compliance and the shelf life of any packaging materials or added ingredients, not the clay mineral itself. A sealed bag or jar of pure bentonite clay powder, kept dry, will perform identically in its clarifying, adsorptive, and detoxifying applications in 20 years as it does today. Congratulations! You own a mineral supplement that was forming in the Cretaceous period and is in absolutely no rush to change. Product 41. Dried whole hibiscus flowers, the deep red, tart, antioxidant-packed dried petals of Hibiscus sabdurifa, used throughout the Americas, Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia to make a tangy, ruby-red herbal tea known variously as agua de Jamaica, carcade, bisap, or simply hibiscus tea. The high organic acid content of dried hibiscus, primarily citric and malic acids, creates a naturally hostile environment for microbial activity, essentially making the dried flowers their own preservative. The deep red color comes from anthocyanin pigments that are also powerful antioxidants, and these compounds are stable in dry sealed storage over extended periods. Traditional hibiscus tea preparation in Mexico and across Latin America has involved dried flower stores maintained for months to years in sealed containers, jars, or bags as household staples. The one-year dates on retail packages of dried hibiscus are a formality that doesn't reflect the actual chemistry. Sealed in a jar, stored away from moisture and direct light, your hibiscus flowers will be making their brilliant red, tartly delicious tea for years. The color may shift very slightly over long storage, and the most volatile top notes of aroma may fade. But the fundamental anthocyanin content, the organic acid profile, and the characteristic hibiscus flavor remain intact far beyond any printed date. Congratulations! Your tea cabinet contains a centuries-old herbal medicine that was cooling people down in tropical heat long before it needed an expiration date. Product 42. Pure food-grade magnesium chloride flakes, available in bulk at health food stores and pool supply companies as a magnesium supplement, bath soak additive, or de-icer. Magnesium chloride is an ionic salt, a compound of magnesium and chloride ions in a crystalline structure. It's hygroscopic, meaning it readily absorbs moisture from the air, which means it clumps easily if left open in humid environments. But the hygroscopic property is a physical characteristic, not a sign of chemical degradation. The compound itself does not break down, does not react with atmospheric oxygen, does not undergo biological decomposition. Clumped magnesium chloride flakes that have absorbed some moisture are entirely valid for their intended uses. Soaking in a bath still delivers transdermal magnesium absorption whether the flakes started clumped or not, and a gentle warming in a low oven will reverse the clumping. The dates on magnesium chloride products, typically 2 to 3 years, are either formulation dates carried over from multi-ingredient products or regulatory compliance items that don't reflect the intrinsic stability of the mineral. Ancient magnesium chloride deposits formed by the evaporation of ancient seas have been mined in chemically identical condition after hundreds of millions of years. Your bag on the bathroom shelf is in no danger from the passage of time. Congratulations! Your mineral bath soak just became indefinitely useful. Product 43. Whole, raw, unprocessed sunflower seeds. Not roasted, not salted, not flavored, but raw, intact seeds with their outer hulls, or at minimum, their inner seed coat intact. Raw sunflower seeds do contain oils, primarily linoleic acid, a polyunsaturated fat, that are, in principle, susceptible to oxidative rancidity over time. This is the industry's legitimate starting point for conservative shelf life labeling. However, the key variable is form. In whole, intact seeds, the outer hull and inner seed coat provide a significant physical barrier against the oxygen access that drives oxidative rancidity. Under sealed, cool, dark storage conditions, the rate of oxidation is dramatically slower than in shelled or processed seeds. Studies on raw seed storage consistently find that intact whole seeds maintain acceptable sensory and nutritional quality well beyond the conservative dates printed on retail packaging, which are calibrated for less than ideal storage. The natural antioxidant content of raw sunflower seeds, vitamin E primarily, also acts as an internal buffer against oxidation, slowing the chain reactions that lead to rancidity. A sealed bag of raw hulled or whole sunflower seeds in a cool pantry will be a perfectly valid snack and cooking ingredient for a year or more beyond any best-by date. The first sign of actual degradation, a bitter or paint-like off flavor, is organoleptic, not microbiological, meaning it's unpleasant before it's dangerous. Congratulations! Your snack drawer contains a more durable product than the label admits. Product 44. Pure dried elderflowers. The small, creamy white, intensely fragrant dried flowers of Sambucus nigra, used in herbal teas, cordials, flavored syrups, and traditional medicine across Europe and North America. The antimicrobial and antioxidant flavonoids in elderflowers, primarily quercetin, kaempferol, and rutin, are stable compounds in dry form that contribute to the self-preserving character of the dried flower. Traditional European herbalists who supplied elderflower products to apothecaries and kitchens understood it as a long shelf-life herb, stored in dried form for seasons at a time. The one-year dates on retail elderflower products exist primarily because formulated elderflower products, syrups, extracts, cordials, do have meaningful shelf life constraints based on their water activity and sugar concentrations. But the dried flowers themselves are not subject to the same chemistry. In a sealed glass jar in a cool, dark pantry, dried elderflowers will retain their characteristic floral aroma, their antioxidant flavonoids, and their therapeutic properties for years beyond the date printed on the package. The fragrance fades slowly as the most volatile aromatic compounds gradually escape, but the backbone of the herb's identity remains present and functional for a long time. Congratulations! The floral remedy that European herbalists have relied on for centuries is far more durable than the modern package suggests. Product 45. Pure dried chamomile flowers, the small daisy-like dried flowers that are among the most widely consumed herbal teas in the world, found in almost every American grocery store and health food market. The apigenin and other flavonoids in chamomile that are responsible for its calming properties are stable polyphenolic compounds with well-documented longevity in dry storage. Chamomile has been used in medicinal and culinary contexts across cultures from ancient Egypt to Europe to the Americas, and traditional herbalists stored dried chamomile for seasons and years as a normal practice. The tea industry's dating on chamomile is aggressive, typically 12 to 18 months, and is primarily about the loss of volatile aromatic compounds that contribute to the tea's flavor and scent. Those aromatics do gradually fade over time. But the therapeutic compounds, the apigenin, the bisabolol, the anti-inflammatory polyphenols, are significantly more stable than the aromatics, meaning that old chamomile tea that smells a bit faint is still delivering most of its actual biological effect. Pharmaceutical research into chamomile extract stability has found meaningful polyphenol retention well beyond labeled dates under controlled storage conditions. Keep your chamomile sealed in an opaque container away from heat and light, and it will be supporting sleep and reducing anxiety for years past the tag. Congratulations! Your evening tea ritual is backed by centuries of herbal tradition and a far more durable chemistry than the box admits. Product 46. Bulk dried split peas, green or yellow. The field pea variety that's been split along its natural seam, hulled, and dried for use in soups, stews, and dal. Like other dried legumes, split peas occupy an interesting middle ground in the shelf life conversation because they've been processed, the hull has been removed, but they remain essentially dormant, dry biological material rather than a processed food. The lipid content of split peas is low, limiting oxidative rancidity risk. The protein and starch matrix is stable in dry conditions. The primary change that occurs in long-stored split peas is a gradual hardening that increases cooking time required to achieve a smooth texture. This is due to the natural starch-protein cross-linking that accelerates very slowly at room temperature. It's not a safety issue. It's not an indicator of nutritional degradation. University Extension food storage research has consistently found that sealed split peas in cool, dry storage conditions maintain food safety and nutritional integrity for periods significantly beyond the 1 to 2 year dates on commercial packaging. Emergency food preparedness guidelines, which are driven by actual chemistry rather than sales cycles, typically include split peas as viable 10-year storage items under good conditions. The industry isn't lying exactly. They're giving you the conservative, liability-safe answer calibrated for worst-case storage. Congratulations! Your soup base just became a decade-long food insurance policy. Product 47. Food-grade pure potassium chloride powder, sold as a salt substitute or mineral supplement under various brand names, used as an electrolyte supplement, a blood pressure management tool, and in food preparation as a low-sodium alternative to table salt. Potassium chloride is, like sodium chloride, an ionic mineral salt. Its crystalline structure is stable, it doesn't oxidize, it doesn't react with atmospheric gases at normal temperatures. Bacteria cannot colonize a pure, dry mineral crystal. The shelf life of potassium chloride from a chemistry standpoint is essentially geological. It exists in ancient evaporite deposits in an identical chemical form to freshly processed food-grade product. The 1 to 2 year dates on potassium chloride products in the supplement and food market are regulatory formalities. The compound inside the sealed container is not changing. Pharmaceutical formulations that use potassium chloride as an electrolyte component rely on its long-term stability as a known property. The only practical concern with stored potassium chloride is clumping due to hygroscopic moisture absorption, which, as with magnesium chloride and other mineral salts, is a physical inconvenience that doesn't affect functionality. Warm it gently, break up the clumps, and it performs exactly as it should. Congratulations! Your salt substitute has a shelf life more accurately measured in decades than in months. Product 48. Whole dried cacao nibs, the roasted, cracked pieces of the cacao bean stripped of their outer husk, with their cocoa butter and flavanol content intact. Not chocolate, not sugar, not added milk, not vanilla. Just the raw or roasted fragments of the actual cacao bean. Cacao nibs contain fat, primarily cocoa butter, which is, as discussed elsewhere, unusually resistant to oxidative rancidity among vegetable fats. They also contain a very high concentration of flavanol antioxidants, including epicatechin and catechin, which are precisely the compounds that protect the fat from oxidation from within. The combination of fat-resistant to rancidity plus internal antioxidant protection makes cacao nibs significantly more shelf-stable than their best-by date of 1 year suggests. Properly sealed and stored away from heat and direct light, cacao nibs maintain their characteristic bitter chocolate flavor and most of their flavanol antioxidant content for well beyond 12 months. The confectionery industry prints conservative dates because their formulated chocolate products, with milk solids, emulsifiers, and added fats, are genuinely more perishable. But pure cacao nibs are not chocolate bars. They are, for the purposes of shelf life chemistry, a concentrated fat and polyphenol matrix with built-in self-preservation mechanisms. Congratulations! Your baking ingredient and snack cupboard just gained a meaningful time extension. Product 49. Pure dried nettle leaf, stinging nettle, Urtica dioica, that has been dried and stripped of its sting. Used in herbal teas, culinary applications, the dried leaf has no sting once heat-treated or dried, and traditional medicine. Nettle leaf is rich in silica, iron, potassium, vitamins K and C, and a range of flavonoids and chlorophyll derivatives. In dried form, the water-soluble vitamins, particularly vitamin C, do gradually degrade over time, but the minerals, the structural compounds, and the stable flavonoids remain present for significantly longer. Traditional herbalists across Europe and North America maintain dried nettle as a standard long-term pantry herb, relied upon as a mineral-rich supplement through winters and lean periods between harvests. The 1 year date on retail dried nettle is primarily about the aroma, the chlorophyll color intensity, and the vitamin C content, all of which do diminish over time. But the mineral content, the silica, the iron, the potassium, these are essentially permanent in a dried herb matrix. If you're drinking metal tea for flavor and vitamin C, fresh or recently dried is better. If you're drinking it as a mineral tonic, older stock that's been sealed and stored properly retains most of what you're after. Congratulations! Your herbal supplement drawer has a longer useful window than the label admits. Product 50. Whole dried dill seeds, the small, ridged, flat seeds of Anethum graveolens that are used in pickling, baking, and cooking across Eastern European, Scandinavian, and Middle Eastern cuisines. Distinct from dried dill weed, the leaf and stem, dill seeds are a far more shelf-stable form of the herb. The seeds contain carvone and limonene as primary volatile compounds, locked within the seed coat at concentrations high enough that the seeds are biologically hostile to microbial colonization. The tight seed structure limits atmospheric oxygen access to the interior, slowing oxidation of the aromatic compounds significantly. Dill seeds were used throughout the ancient Mediterranean and Middle Eastern world, not just as spice, but as a digestive medicinal, and historical records from Greek and Roman texts describe storage of dried spice seeds for use across seasons and years. Traditional Scandinavian and Eastern European household practice maintained sealed dill seed stores as multi-season pantry staples, cycled through brine and pickling preparations across the year without any concern about the seeds themselves deteriorating. The 1 year label on your dill seeds is calibrated for the ground version and extended to whole seeds for convenience. Sealed whole dill seeds in a cool, dark location will be flavoring your pickles and bread for years. The aromatic intensity does gradually fade, but the pickling chemistry remains active far longer than any label will concede. Congratulations, your pickling cabinet just became a much longer-range asset. Product 51. Pure dried elderberries, the small, dark, purple-black, tart berries of Sambucus nigra in their fully dried form, used widely as an immune support herbal remedy, most commonly as syrup, tea, or gummies. The anthocyanin pigments that give elderberries their intense dark color are among the most stable plant polyphenols. In dry form, away from light and oxygen exposure, they maintain their antioxidant activity for significantly longer than the 1 to 2 year dates on retail products suggest. Traditional European herbal medicine stores, which served communities through winters and illness seasons, maintained dried elderberry stocks routinely, relying on the dried berry's ability to hold its medicinal value across multi-year storage when conditions were right. The key distinction is form. Elderberry juice, syrup, and extract are water-based preparations that genuinely have short shelf lives once made because the water activity supports microbial growth. But dried whole elderberries are an entirely different product. Low moisture, high polyphenol concentration, minimal biological activity. A sealed jar of dried elderberries in a cool, dark pantry will retain their anthocyanin content and immune-modulating compounds for years past the date on the package. What fades first is the aromatic volatiles, the berry-like scent, not the therapeutic chemistry. Congratulations, your immune support reserve is more durable than the supplement aisle wants you to know. Product 52. Food-grade pure tapioca starch, also called tapioca flour, the fine, bright white powder extracted from cassava root by washing, processing, and drying. Tapioca starch is pure starch, essentially glucose polymer chains with no fat content, no protein content, and very low moisture in its processed, dried form. There is, chemically speaking, very little to degrade in a properly sealed container of dry tapioca starch. Starch itself is stable under dry conditions. Bacteria and mold require moisture to colonize it. Oxidation isn't relevant because there are no fats or oxidizable pigments present. The thickening power of tapioca is a physical property of the starch granule structure, which doesn't degrade spontaneously at room temperature over normal storage timescales. Food manufacturers who use tapioca as a functional ingredient in processed food production work with bulk starch inventories maintained well beyond consumer-facing package dates. The 1 to 2 year dates on consumer retail tapioca starch are conservative estimates calibrated for cardboard box packaging in variable humidity environments. In a sealed glass jar or airtight container in a dry pantry, tapioca starch will thicken your sauces and desserts with the same precision in 5 years that it does today. Congratulations! Your gluten-free baking staple just earned a substantially longer lease on life than the bag suggests. Product 53. Pure dried rose hips, the seed-bearing fruit of the rose plant, Rosa canina, and related species, typically dried and used in herbal teas, jams, and traditional medicine across Europe and North America. Rose hips are among the richest natural sources of vitamin C, containing anywhere from 10 to 40 times the concentration found in fresh oranges, and they contain a range of polyphenols, carotenoids, and flavonoids that contribute to their antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. In dried form, the vitamin C does degrade over time. This is the most legitimate part of any shelf life argument for dried rose hips because ascorbic acid is reactive in the presence of oxygen and light. However, the degradation rate in properly sealed, cool, dark-stored dried rose hips is significantly slower than the 1 year date on most retail packages implies. Traditional Nordic and Eastern European societies maintain dried rosehip stores through winter specifically as a vitamin source during the months when fresh fruit was unavailable, and this practice operated on storage timescales of 6 to 18 months routinely. The remaining polyphenols, carotenoids, and flavonoids in dried rosehips are far more stable than the vitamin C and maintain meaningful antioxidant activity for years. A sealed jar of dried rosehips in a cool, dark pantry retains much of its health value well past the printed date. The vitamin C potency does diminish, that's real and worth acknowledging, but the overall antioxidant profile remains substantial. Congratulations! Your herbal tea cupboard contains a centuries-old traditional remedy that is still doing meaningful work long past the label's suggestion. And there it is, 53 products. 53 examples of the chemistry of permanence being quietly buried under the marketing of disposability. Look at your pantry differently now. Look at your spice rack, your supplement shelf, your herb cabinet. Some of those jars and bags with the dates you've been anxious about contain compounds that were formed in the Cretaceous period, stored in Egyptian tombs for 3,000 years, and transported across oceans in medieval spice ships, and nobody on any of those journeys needed a Best By label to know whether it was still good. The entire infrastructure of expiration date anxiety has been constructed by industries that need you to buy things again. It's not a conspiracy, it's just a business model. And understanding it is the most straightforward form of financial self-defense available to any household. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next installment of what we're calling the Shelf Life Files, because there are a lot more products to cover and we're just getting started. Drop your city in the comments. We want to see how widespread this particular brand of pantry anxiety has become across the country. And if you know a product that belongs on this list, something in your home that you're convinced is being artificially dated out of your life, tell us in the comments. What's your candidate for the most dishonestly short shelf life in the American home? We want to hear it. Now go look at your shelves with new eyes. You're better stocked than anyone told you. Safety disclaimer. Hold on. Before you start building a bunker from your pantry and declaring yourself fully independent from the grocery system, there's a necessary and genuinely important caveat that needs to be on the record. Everything in this video is analytical and educational. It's not a recommendation to ignore product guidance on medications or to use chemically altered, improperly stored, or visually compromised products of any kind. The researcher behind this content is not your doctor, your pharmacist, or your registered dietitian. What we've discussed is the chemistry of stability under ideal conditions. Real-world conditions are not always ideal. If a product has been exposed to moisture, extreme temperature, contamination, or shows any change in appearance, smell, color, or texture, that physical reality overrules any theoretical chemical stability argument. Especially for anything going into or onto your body, supplements, herbs, foods, use common sense. If something smells off, looks wrong, or you have any doubt about its condition, the theory doesn't override your senses. Consult a professional before making decisions about medications or therapeutic products. The external threat of marketing manipulation is real, but your personal responsibility for evaluating what's in front of you is the actual foundation of smart, safe self-sufficiency. Be smarter than the system, and also smarter than careless assumptions. That's what genuine critical thinking looks like. End of transmission.